it comes to new construction, there is no secret that I am probably one of the biggest fans of, that being what you purchase in the home market community. I really like selling that. I really appreciate what happens in that space, but it's not all it's not all glitz and glamour and amazing things that happen. So today I want to walk you through 10 things, that the builder just may not tell you. And some of it's because they can't tell you, some of it's because, maybe some different reasons there, but 10 things that the builder and the building communities are not telling you, and that you will never know unless you know how to ask the right questions. So number one, amenity over promising. So here's what I mean by this. A lot of times what we're seeing right now is all of these builders and developers are doing these massive master plan communities, and you see all the different artist renderings, and it says, hey, we're going to have a bowling alley, and we're going to have shopping, and we're going to have a lazy river, and we're going to have a yoga studio, and we're going to have a gym, and we're going to have a pool, and there's going to be parks and trails, and like they do all of this marketing around all of these things. But at the end of the day, you only have what you have built, right? So this is especially true if you're buying in like first phases of neighborhoods, and you see all the renderings like, oh yeah, we're going to open the amenity center next fall. And here's the thing: this is not a sales rep lying to you. They are going off of the information that they have that's been given to them by their company, who's working with a development company. So they're just going off of the information that they have at hand. But I would say if it doesn't exist, there's a chance that it may not, right? Sometimes, development plans change. Developers say, hey, we're going to do one thing, and then we go do another thing. They say, hey, we're going to build a lagoon, and it's going to be awesome in the center of the community, and it's going to have all of these different amenities. And you're 2 years into this project, and you're like, where's our freaking lagoon? Like, oh yeah, well, we're working on it. Okay, but you're still paying those HOA fees based on those amenities, right? So just be aware that sometimes, unless they're already on the ground, they can go away and things can change. So if you're buying into a community solely based on the amenities, and that shouldn't be your only consideration. I know it's a big consideration for a lot of people, but if that's your only thing and it's not there yet, you just be mindful, be prepared that the plans may change. Like I said, that's not the builder is lying to you. That's not that they're being deceitful. That's not any of those things. Just be aware that unless it already exists, it may change, and your HOA you're probably going to be paying for that even before it gets developed. So amenities, first thing they'll never tell you. They're going to sell you the best story possible, but they may change if they're not there. Number two, inventory, specifically build inventory, can be artificially manipulated. So here's what I mean by this. So builders are not obligated in any way to put homes that they have for sale on MLS, which MLS then feeds to Zillow, Realtor, Redfin, all of those places that we go looking for homes. They're also not obligated to keep their websites fully up to date. Because many builders' websites are, frankly, they're terrible. So what I mean by this artificial inventory control or manipulation is, in some cases, you get this feeling where it's like, oh, hey, we've only got three homes left, and it's like, oh, well, we need to move, we need to make a decision, we need to go. And what they can't tell you is what they're saying is we only have 3 homes left that we can sell this month, and next week we're going to release 15 more. So here's, again, tension on this side. It's not always the sales rep. They work for that company. They're doing what they're told, and it's not their call. It's it's management's call. So sometimes you'll see these things get, you get this fear, you get FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. It's like, oh, we're not going to have anything. We're not going to have anything available. Well, truthfully, you drive around the neighborhood and you see, oh, they've got 15 or 20 or 30 or 50 lots. They just can't sell them yet. And it's different for every builder and every development. Some builders will sell, at dirt, and they, can buy them from the developer as soon as they can get contracts on them. Some of them, developers make them wait. Some of them, it's a waiting on releasing from the development. Some of them, honestly, it's a city thing where they're waiting on permits and they don't want to get backlogged. Some of them, it's a manpower thing. Like, hey, we don't want to have more than X number of homes being built right now because we don't have the manpower to manage it. So there's this artificial, it's artificial, but a feeling of a scarcity of inventory. And we already know as a whole here in DFW, we have a scarcity of inventory. Like builders cannot build quick enough with all the people that are here and all the people that are moving here to make it to where we can get people into homes. But there's always a chance that they have more inventory that they just can't or don't talk about. You just have to kind of watch it and see. Some builders have moved to where they only sell when a home hits a certain stage. So like stage 5, stage 6, which a lot of them would translate, like if we're looking at that would translate as saying, hey, we're not selling this home until we hit like frame stage or drywall stage or after drywall stage, because then we know definitively when it's going to close. We can say, hey, this home will be ready in 60 days and we can close it and it's good. So you have homes that are being built that you can't necessarily buy yet. I've had this experience a couple times where we've looked at a few different builders and it's like, hey, we don't have anything, like we want one specific floor plan. And it's like, oh, well, I don't have that one yet, but I might have it in a week. And it's like, what do you mean you might have it in a week? It's like, well, we haven't been released to sell it yet because it hasn't hit the certain stage that we need it to hit. So yes, there is a shortage of inventory, both actually and artificially. So when you go in and you're talking to builders and you're asking questions about lots, or you're asking questions about inventory, or asking questions about building, like just know that there's probably more to it than what they're actually telling you. That's not always the case, like I said, especially the deeper into a neighborhood phase you get, like the more that it's completed, the more that artificial like holdback goes away, at least in my opinion. The earlier on in the neighborhood, there's more of a holdback just because they, again, all of those things like we've talked about, like labor shortage, management, permits, trying to fluctuate pricing one way or the other. So just know that. Also, you're going to see price increases. Sometimes it's every 5 builds, sometimes it's every 10 contracts, sometimes it's every builder does that differently, and the salesperson has zero control over that. It's just, and to be honest, it's just as frustrating for them as it is for you when they're like, oh, hey, we were talking about doing this deal, and sometimes they know it and sometimes they don't know. Like sometimes they can say, hey, I've been told every 5 contracts I write, we're gonna up our price, and I've written 4. So math would say we're about to go up. So other times they, come in on a Monday morning and find out, oh, your prices have gone up 10 or 15 or whatever $1,000, and then they have to come back and communicate that with you, and it's no fun. So you can kind of feel that, but just know oftentimes you will see that the inventory can be artificially manipulated based on how they're holding things one way or the other. Number 3, we're going to talk lender incentives. So you will see often that whether you see it on a Google ad, or you see it on a TikTok ad, or you see it on a builder's website, you'll see postings of like, hey, save $20,000, or hey, here's $25,000, or here's a 3-2-1 buy down, or here's a 4.99 interest rate. And I'm not telling you that those are bad and that they don't exist. They do. I get deals put together all the time with those kinds of incentives in them. But here's the but. But the biggest thing that you need to understand is majority of the time that money is tied to you staying within their in-house lending. Also, some of the time when you see a special promo like, oh, hey, this is on select homes, there's a few builders that say, oh, hey, we can do this on select homes. And you're like, well, what is the select homes? What does that mean? And they're trying to get you in the door to have this conversation, but it usually is tied to homes that can close within the next 30 days. So if you see a house and you're like, oh, it's got a 5.99 interest rate and blinds and fridge and washer and dryer and all those things, there's a really good chance there's only a couple of those in every community. And there's also a really good chance the only way you're getting that is if you're closing quickly. So that's the first side of it. The second side of it is just the lender incentives or the builder incentives in general are oftentimes tied to their in-house lending. So what you'll see in your contract is you'll say, oh, hey, they're offering us $15,000. And then they'll break it out and they'll say, 9 of this is tied to our in-house lending team. If you go outside of that, you're going to get 7. So 7 and 9, 9 from the lender, 7 from the builder gets us to our 15. If you go outside of the lending, you're probably going to lose some of that. Same thing is true on design incentives. So like if you're building your house, oftentimes those will fluctuate as well. Some builders do a really good job of splitting that and saying, hey, you have this much in design and you have this much in closing cost incentive. Some of them will say, hey, it's a pool of money. So it's like, oh, hey, you have $30,000 and you can allocate it however you want to do that. So make sure you're asking those questions. Make sure you understand, like, hey, what do I have to use in design? What do I have to use in incentive? Also, if it's an inventory home, they're going to tell you, hey, some of this, hey, you have $20,000 and 10 of it has to be used for financing. Like there's no other way to use it. You have to use it for financing. The other 15 is flexible. You can do the rate buy down. You can do closing costs. You can do price reductions. If you have questions on how to spend that money, we have video content on our channel. It's probably linked somewhere. Or you can always reach out to me and we can talk through best way to spend that money. But just know, like, when you see that stuff advertised, it is going to be tied to select homes, usually depending on the builder, and the better incentives are on those things that close quickly. So if you're like, oh, I see this really great rate, but I want to close in 3 months, you're probably not going to get that same offer. And sometimes they attach that offer to just a few different homes. As we continue going, I need to introduce myself. If we haven't met before, my name is Zach. I sell real estate here in the DFW market, specifically a ton of new construction. That is what my team and I specialize in. That is what we're here to help with. So that's what we do, right? If you have questions or you have comments or you need help, you're relocating into Dallas, or you are here already and you're thinking new homes, our contact information is at the bottom of this video. We're happy to help, but again, as always, like I tell people, I can't do anything unless you reach out, and all I can do is provide information at this point. So we've done 3. Now let's go to 4. And so here's the one that is. This one's hard because I need to give you the information about this, but there's not really a whole lot that can be done with this information. It's just good information to have. So number 4, I'm calling this one the neighborhood development secret. I think that's probably maybe I'll workshop a name. But what this talks about is when you look at these larger communities that are being developed that have more than one builder, that's usually the case. Is when you look at larger communities, the developer brings in all these different builders, and you'll have you have Perry, Highland, David Weekley, K. Hovnanian, and Grand, any number of different builders at some of these communities. You'll have anywhere from 3 to some communities I've seen upwards of 7 or 10. Think places like Solterra would be one of those ones that you're like, oh, there's like 10 different builders that we could work with at varying different price points. And so what you have to understand is the way that the builders buy lots. Sometimes, and this changes based on development. So sometimes builders will have a whole section, and it's like, hey, this street right here, this is a First Texas street, but this street right here, this is a Brightland street, and then this section over here, well, that's a Perry section, right? And so you'll have those kind of things happen. That's a little rare, honestly. Most of the time what you have happen is you have they buy within the same section, and so you'll have a step rule. So like, hey, Highland owns these 3 lots, and then the next section is David Weekley owns these 3 lots, and then so you get all this mix and match, or it's like every other, or they bought, there's all different ways that they buy these lots from the developer. So what you have to be mindful of is when you look at a home, whether it's an inventory or it's a build job, look at the builder's map, because what they're gonna show you is they're gonna show you the whole map of the development, and then they're gonna show you what lots they own, right? And so what you really don't have control of is who your neighbors are. So let's say, for example, you go into a neighborhood that has pricing anywhere from $400 to $800, which is a very real thing in some neighborhoods. And you're saying, hey, we're gonna buy at the top end of our budget, and the top end of our budget is like $740, and it's like, awesome, you're building a really cool house, you build this big, massive, beautiful estate, and you buy it and close on it, and then you're like, well, based on the lot development across the street, there's like a 1,500 square foot house that was built by a potentially lesser quality builder. It really doesn't affect you per se. Like I said, it's not your money. You're not buying that house. It doesn't affect you, but it kind of affects the feeling of your property. Like, I know it's kind of arbitrary, and so every development is different, and you don't get to control your neighbor's land, and you don't get to control what they do. But also, it's just important to kind of know like who's developing where in that community, who has the 60-foot lots versus who's doing the 40-foot lots, right? And where do those overlap? Or hey, we have a neighborhood that has, you know, duplexes and single family. Well, do I want to be on the side that is close to the duplexes? Do I want to be on the edge of the 40 and the 50-foot lots? Do I want to be like all the way in the back corner where they're only doing 70-foot lots? So those are important to look at. Those are important to ask questions about. A good sales rep will never like disparage their competition. Like, they should not be like, oh, they're freaking terrible, they're the worst. Like, they shouldn't do that. They should sell you on why they're the best. That's a different mindset. Sell you on why they're the best, not downplay the other competition. But look at the map. Look at what's going on. Look at those land plots. Look at the homes that are being built around it. If you're buying inventory, drive up and down the street. Like, get a feel for it. So, like I said, this is something they won't tell you, but it's also like something that they themselves have no control over. Number 5, please know your representation. The builder sales rep is not there to represent you. They are there to work for the builder. And I say that as a caveat of like, I work with some phenomenal builder sales reps. They're caring, they're kind, they're knowledgeable, all of these things. I've also worked with some that are like not that. But at the end of the day, their job is to represent their builder. Their job is not to represent you. And so you need to make sure that you have representation in that transaction. Make sure that you have a realtor that knows that space, or have a realtor that knows what's going on. You'll see some builders that on their websites, they'll talk about, oh, do you need a realtor? And very clean, plain English. You know, it's a website that rhymes with Schmimar that I will not sell. If you look at their website, there's language that's like, no, you do not. We have, professional sales counselors that know the neighborhoods and know everything. While they work for the builder, you really don't need representation. Yes, you do. And just know that that's probably one of the most important things. I know it sounds self-serving, and I don't mean it to be self-serving. I mean it as authentically as I can. You need representation, and your representation is not that sales rep. Also, if in the same line of this, if you're going to go talk to a builder, you need to know their rules and regulations on, not regulations, but their rules on when you can add a realtor to that contract. For some builders, they believe in what's called procuring cause. So it's less about you having representation and more about think like a referral. So what they want is they want that realtor registered on the very first visit. So like if you're going in to talk to a salesperson and you don't have a realtor with you, they may not let you add somebody in for representation after the fact, even if you haven't signed a contract. There's a few builders that are like that. There's a few that are a little bit more lenient that are saying, hey, yeah, we love working with realtors. We want you to have representation, like up until the point that we write that contract. We will get them in, answer questions, and make sure that they can help you along throughout this process. Once you write the contract, because I've had a few people reach out and they say, hey, we're already under contract on our new build. We don't have a realtor. We didn't like our realtor. Can you help us? And I'm like, unfortunately, I cannot. You have a contract with your realtor and you have a contract with the builder. They're already on your deal. I can answer any general questions for you, but unfortunately, I'm going to have to defer you to your sales rep or to your realtor or whoever your representation is. So just know, before you go in and start, go drive around, go walk things, but before you go in and start having conversations, make sure you have your representation pretty much in place. Number 6. HOAs. I get asked a lot, what's the story on the HOA? Are they terrible? Are they awful? Are they amazing? Do I have to pay them? Are they terrible? Are they awesome? Honestly, just depends on the HOA. Are they amazing? Same thing. And do you have to pay them? Yes. If you buy a home within an HOA community, you have to pay them. They can take your house if you don't. But before you sign that contract, ask for the community CC&Rs, community covenants and restrictions. Basically, this is the big document that governs how your HOA functions. This is what says, hey, here's what you're allowed to do, here's what you're not allowed to do, here's what can be done within your community, what can't be done within your community, what the HOA pays for, how the money is spent, Do they mow your front yard? Do they just cover maintenance? All of those things. It's a big, honestly, it's a big, long, boring document. But at least make sure you read that. Make sure you ask those questions of the builder. Make sure you talk to them and say, hey, what's the representation like for the HOA? Is it run by a third-party management company? Are we self-managed within the neighborhood? Do we have representation within that? How does that shift based on the phases in which we're developed? Because a lot of times early on, the builders carry the representation with the development, and then once they hit a certain milestone, basically they lose spots and the community adds spots as board members or whatever you call it from the HOA. So ask for those, read through those, make sure that, if you're thinking, hey, we want to build a pool in our backyard, what I don't want you to do is buy in a neighborhood that says, nope, you can't build pools in your backyard. And we don't know that because we didn't read through the CC&Rs and the HOA documents. So just get copies of those, ask for information on their website, talk to the neighbors. If it's a developed community, go drive around. I mean, I'm not saying be weird. Don't do that. But if somebody's out, be like, hey, do you like living here? What's the this? What's the that? Just have a conversation and say, hey, we're thinking about buying here, and but don't do it in a weird way. So make sure you get those. Make sure you understand what those mean and how those affect your home. Because if you don't follow the HOA rules, they most likely they will fine you. And they can put a lien on your house, which is not fun. Number 7, lucky number 7 or unlucky number 7. The builder's contract. Builder's contract is not for your benefit. It is for the builder's benefit. So read it, ask questions, know where the ins and the outs are. Just know that there's a good chance you're not going to change this contract. If you're like, I don't like that, they're going to be like, well, we don't like you. You can go buy a different house. Their contracts are written by their attorney. So unless you are an attorney, and I am not an attorney, so unless you are probably not making changes to their contract, but that doesn't mean that you should not understand it. You need to know things like, hey, if we back out or if we change our mind, what happens to our earnest money? Do we keep it? Do you keep it? Do we split it? Is there a way we can get it back? Questions like, if we don't close on time, not the builder, because there's a chance they won't close on time, but if we don't close on time, what happens? Usually that's hey, they start fining you by the day, and those fines I've seen them anywhere from $100 to $750 to $1,000 a day. If they tell you have to close and you can't close, know what happens when you're in default. Know what happens if you don't follow through. Know what happens if they don't follow through. Know what happens if there's a disagreement and you have to go to arbitration. Also, in builders' contracts, most of the time, builders have a clause or a sentence in there, and I like to call it you've been a butthead and a pain in the butt to deal with clause. And this clause basically says something to the extent of the builder can cancel your contract at any time without any written reason whatsoever. Most of the time, they do not call on this clause, at least in my experience. When this gets called on, when this gets used, is when you as a customer become, difficult, like a pain. And again, if things are wrong, we want them to be fixed. They should be fixed. But when things become increasingly difficult, or you're not good to work with, or you're showing up on job sites when you're not supposed to be there, you're making changes, you're doing all these things, they have that clause in there that they can terminate that contract. Speaking of changes, they look at if you're building. This is more about building long term than it is on buying an inventory, because this house is probably already done. If you're building, look at what the change order costs are. So at a certain point, you're going to hit a point where they're going to say to you, hey, we've made all the selections, we've made all the decisions, you cannot make changes. If you want to make changes, it's going to cost you X number of dollars. It's a $500 change fee plus a minimum $150 fee to the designer, plus the cost of the actual material. So they want to make it incredibly difficult to make those changes. So and rightly so, because they have to order material. So just make sure you read that contract, know the language about what happens if it doesn't appraise, who covers the shortage, where those questions come in, things like that. So just make sure you read your contract. Most of the time, the builder can give you a sample contract before you sign, and you can ask for that. Ask for a chance to review it. Again, you're not going to make changes in there, but I just want you to understand what you're signing, what you're agreeing to before you agree to that. Number 8, property taxes. This is a big one here in North Texas. Actually, just a big one in Texas in general. People that move here from out of state, we do not pay state sales tax or state income tax. We do have sales tax. We do not have a state tax on our income, which is awesome. But on the flip side, we do pay property taxes. Most of the time, you will see those average out somewhere between 1.9 and 3.1%, depending on the neighborhood. So just know that you're going to have to pay property taxes, and you need to know the difference between taxes on unimproved land versus taxes on improved land. So the short of it is, if you're building, when the county assesses the value on that land, they assess just the land only. There's not anything on the there's no structure there, so they're just paying taxes on the value of the land, and then the next year you pay taxes based on the value of the structure. So if you build, oftentimes your first year of taxes that you pay will be paid on a lesser value because it's only on the value of the land. If you get and then it re-ups for the next year. If you buy off of a builder's inventory, it depends on when the house was completed based on what the assessment has been done. Here's a pro tip. So assessments are done. We get our assessments usually we get a preliminary in March-ish of hey, this is what we think it's going to be worth. But assessments actually come out in October, and then we pay them. They're due by the end of January. So if you find a house that's been sitting on a builder's inventory and you know that it's been sitting for a while, or your realtor knows that it's been sitting for a while, and you've been looking at it, and you're watching it, make sure when you get to closing that you check those tax assessments, because there's a good chance if that house has been sitting for a while, the assessment's been redone based on what the builder should owe, so you should be getting credit for the time of the year that they own that house for those taxes. So just make sure, ask those questions. If it hasn't been assessed, you're not going to get that. But if it's been sitting for, if the house is done and it's been completed and it's sitting for a while, make sure the lender and the title company do the correct assessment on that so that you get the right credit when you collect on that, so that you can pay the taxes and you don't get hit with the biggest bill for them all. Of course, make sure you file your homestead exemption. Make sure you do all those things. That'll help mitigate a little bit of those taxes. If it's a primary residence, it doesn't help a ton, but every little bit helps. Maybe one day we will get to where our property taxes are lower, or we don't pay them at all. Also, there's a good chance you're probably going to have a MUD or a PID. There are a few neighborhoods that don't do that. Basically, what that means is that's how you're paying for the infrastructure. It's a taxing entity that covers the infrastructure and the build out for the neighborhood and the maintenance of the roads and stuff, things like that within the neighborhood. We can get into detail about MUDs and PIDs and how they're different. And we can find communities that don't have it, but they're the rarity. Majority of them will have something along those lines that go with that. All right, 2 more. We're rolling along. We're moving and grooving. The thing that they won't tell you often is, hey, don't be dazzled by the model home, right? You're going to walk into this model home and it's going to have everything that the builder could ever do to show you what they're capable of and to show this home off. But you have to understand what it took to make that happen. I mean, there's a good chance that it's anywhere between 50 to 150 above the base price of what they would list that home for. So yes, the model home is pretty. Enjoy it. Look at it. But know that your home is probably not going to look like that unless you have the budget to make it look like that. So be sure to ask questions about what are standard features for the community, what are standard based on this plan. So a lot of times, as you'll find, depending on the community, is standard features are different. It's oh, hey, this is our one series, but in these different communities, based on the price point, we run them at a different standard feature set list. So make sure you ask for those standard features. Also, if you're going to build or you're buying off the builder's inventory, ask to go walk the home. Go ask and say, hey, can we walk through homes, even if they're already sold, and just kind of get questions of hey, what was standard, what was the upgrade, what did this cost, just so you know ballpark wise what you're getting into. Because I don't want you to have this you walk into this big, beautiful, grand, massive, amazing home, and then you go to close on it and you're oh, I didn't get any of that. What happened? So ask those questions, have the sales rep, walk you through and point out, hey, this is what's standard. This was an upgrade. This is the ballpark of what that upgrade cost. This is how this should be configured. This is what we did differently. Just ask those questions, because if you don't, you might, think you're getting one thing and end up having to settle for something else. Lastly, number 10 is future development plans. And this kind of goes back to number 1. And so in number 1, we were talking about future development plans within the HOA. Number 10, I'm talking about future development plans around the community. Ask them, to the best of their knowledge, what's coming in that area. Do they know of schools that are being built? Do they know of commercial development that's coming? Do they know of, new communities that are being developed on the outside of that community? Of course, they don't have any control over those things, but if they've heard or they know, like, we want to know that, because the last thing I want you to do is be like, oh, we're getting this house on a beautiful green belt and it's awesome and I've got all these trees behind me because it's at the back of the development, and then 3 months after you move in, they're back there moving dirt and you're like, what is going on? It's like, oh, this is a brand new community and it's not connected to your community, but it's a separate community outside of that. Or, oh, we're building a commercial space and here's where the Dollar Tree and all the restaurants are going. Now, obviously, like I said, they can only tell you what they know. This is a great place to try and look in on city zoning, city planning. Ask questions, ask your realtor if they know of anything that's going on in those areas. For some people, it doesn't matter. For others, you're like, oh my gosh, if I would have known that was going to be right here, we would have never bought this house. So they can only tell you what they know. But don't be surprised, like with as much development, if you see farmland and you're like, oh, look at this, we're going to buy this because it's all in this farmland area, it's probably not going to stay farmland. Just being 100% honest, at some point it's probably going to get developed. It may not have a development plan right now, but with the way things are growing, just know it's future development. And of course, they're always going to sell you on the dream, right? That's their job. It's, hey, this is the best community. We have the best schools and we have the best amenities and it's all these things. And their job is to sell you on the dream. And I want you to buy the dream. I just want you to be realistic about the dream that you're buying. I'm trying to be an optimist as best as I know how. So I've given you 10 things. I could probably give you more, but this makes for a really long video. If you have questions or you have comments about these, drop them down below. I'd love to respond and answer anything that I can. If you are looking at buying again or building here in DFW, regardless whether you're here or you're moving here, my team and I, we would love to help. Our contact information is always at the bottom of the video. Reach out if you have questions or if we can assist you in any way. We would love to represent you in your transactions and make those things happen for you. Guys, I appreciate your time. I appreciate all the love and support and hanging out. If you found value in this video, again, thumbs up goes a long way. And if you want to continue to learn about new construction here in DFW, you can subscribe to our channel. We have new content every single week. So thanks for hanging out. We will see you in our next video. Bye for now.